about the one about the Old Testament last year, and now we're doing the New Testament. We are live from Mount Shasta.
Live from Mount Shasta. What do you know? We don't have a power outage this week. Yay!
Yay! That was a long one.
It was right about 14 hours. It was out last week. So my apologies to anybody online that we weren't here last week. We had no free-flowing electrons to deal with to energize our crystal chips in our computing machines. Yeah, it's a real drag when you're trying to broadcast and you got no power. So welcome everybody. This is Toltec Discussions with Golden Eagle. And who have we got online so far?
Well, I mean, we're just barely on. Okay, hold on. We have Dennis, and I don't even want to try to ruin this name. If it's Maha Marua.
It's Sarah.
Oh, that's Muad'Dib.
Oh, Sarah Muad'Dib.
Muad'Dib needs to change her name to Muad'Dib. That is her official Toltec name. Welcome, Muad'Dib. And
Hi, Janice.
we're expecting a few more online. Unless there's a hurricane or one of the many thunderstorms that knocks power out in Florida. I seem to recall a few of those from time to time.
I'll just text them, let them know.
During the time I lived in Florida, I experienced several hurricanes, several tornadoes.
Scary.
Yeah. I was stuck on the barrier island out between Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach. This thing's like a half-mile wide. There's one road. And I'm driving, and it's like 2 miles either direction to the causeway back to the mainland. And all of a sudden, from the mainland, moving onto the barrier islands, then turning right down the highway towards me, is this lovely little tornado. I'm like, oh my, that looks like a tornado. Oh my, that is a tornado. And it's like, okay, I need to turn around. And just as I was ready to pop a illegal U-turn, it turned and went out towards going out to sea.
Wow.
And it went through someplace, and I saw this something being thrown up. It looked like, oh, newspapers or something. Well, I get a half mile down the road, and that wasn't newspapers. That was 4x8 sheets of plywood from a construction site. All over, everywhere. Some of them had come down through people's parked cars. Oh, it was a mess. So I was, half a mile from the eye of a tornado.
You
when
were
I lived
lucky.
in Florida. Yeah, I was very happy.
And protected.
Yeah, I was very happy it turned and went out to sea, where it really can't do much damage. But it did damage getting out to sea. So, yeah, fond memories of Florida. I used to work there and go play in the Keys and go do a lot of scuba diving because there wasn't a whole lot else to do back then in the 1980s. Not the part of Florida I lived in. There was work your 80 hours a week at the Space Center and get drunk and eat pizza or go scuba diving. That was pretty much it. We didn't have time for social lives or anything like that.
Wow.
So, the way these things work, since we have a couple new people online, the discussion, these tend to revolve around, oh, you know what I need? I need my cough drops.
Okay. So we've had Maria come in, and it looks like Team Tampa is here.
Team Tampa.
Team Tampa.
All right. The Maria, we were above freezing today, Maria. How about you? She's in Wisconsin somewhere. So,
-2.
yeah, so we're bragging about being, above freezing, and she brags about being above zero. So there's about 20, 30 degree difference between us. Thank you. Got to get my fix from my dealer here. So we talk about things pertaining to Toltec philosophy. And this revolves around the conduit energy, which is one of the main tools we use in the Toltec work. It revolves around upgrading our consciousness and what's required to do that, and how we work as a group to change the collective consciousness of humanity. Because that's the only way we're going to change the world. We don't have enough pitchforks and torches to change it any other way. No matter how much fun it would be to deal with the politicians in Washington or Sacramento, or fill in the blank with your state capital here. What is the capital of Wisconsin? Is it Madison? I think so.
I think so.
Wisconsin's not as bad off as Michigan. Michigan as a state right now has been selected as the test case for the country of how bad can we make things before people rebel. And I'm not joking in that. That's the literal truth. It just came out today, is when I first saw it, that the individual behind the Flat Earth movement the last 2 to 3 years is a CIA operative. He's a CIA asset, being paid by them to disseminate this misinformation, to assess the dumbing down of the country. So I called that one 2 years ago. If you go back to my post, you'll see me making that statement 2 years ago. It was a test case by the CIA. And so that's truth. So what I'm telling you about Michigan is the truth. We're not going to win that battle with pitchforks by putting people's heads on pikes, which would be really fun. I mean, my ancestors invented that sport of heads on pikes, but that won't work anymore. We're trying to upgrade consciousness of humanity to a higher vibrational state that makes all of the problems that humanity has currently given ourselves obsolete. Einstein once had a quote that you don't solve the problems, the significant problems we face, with the same type or kind or level of thinking that created them. That quote is misquoted many ways, but it all carries that same connotation. That one word. Same kind of thinking, same type of thinking, same level of thinking. We have to go higher. We have to invoke the knowledge that's freely available from the higher planes. All you got to do is ask. There's entities on the higher planes just drooling for the opportunity to hand you the solution to one of the world's problems and let you get all the credit for it. I don't even want the credit. I don't care about credit. I want the world that is conducive to spiritual transcendence for humanity. This has been the Toltec work for many tens of thousands of years. So that's what we talk about. And we go back and forth between the big picture and little fine details. We have to work on individual pixels, if we're going to use the computer image analogy, and we have to work on what is this a picture of. And when somebody gets onto Photoshop and starts erasing part of our picture and putting BS garbage into it, we have to go, wait, somebody just changed that. No, put it back. And then it's like when you're doing Photoshop, you can lock layers. Okay, we need to lock these layers. You don't get to change that one. Sorry. So the key question then becomes, well, how do we do that? How do we change the world? How do we convince billions of people that they're on the wrong path? The sad truth is we won't convince all of them. So the old 60s bumper sticker comes into play here. Like 1960s, not the 2060s or the 1860s. We're not at the 2060s yet, although we're getting close. A lot of us alive now will be alive in the 2060s, I'm sure, if we don't blow the planet up first. That's our goal, is get to the 2060s without blowing the planet up. If we make it that far, I think we've got a chance. So we've got to make it that far, and we have to change consciousness. And the change is, the bumper sticker, rather, the 60s bumper sticker is, think globally, act locally. We might want to upgrade that to think universally, act locally, not just this globe. The work we do here affects other worlds, not just our own. A lot of people aren't quite ready for that level of responsibility yet, but those days are gone. So get ready, because we're going. We're going in. Does anybody have a question before we start?
You should give them a minute.
Yeah, there's about a 15-second delay each way. So we might have to give them a minute. Anybody locally here have a question? You, woman in the back.
Why do you project that timeline, like the 2060?
I think if we make it that far, that was rather arbitrary and random of a number.
No particular reason, you just chose it.
Well, it was 100 years. Well, I'm talking about the 1960s bumper sticker. So I went 100 years into the future from the 1960s when the great social movements started. And if we get that far without destroying ourselves, we probably will make it a lot further.
I see.
I don't know for sure that there's anything significant about that number. I think major change will happen well before the 60s, which is why humanity's still at risk. We're not out of the woods yet.
I have a question.
I was gonna say Revelations promises us we get another 1,000 years once we get through this conflict. So,
Yeah.
but we're not through it yet.
Any online questions?
Not yet.
Your question.
Well, without getting into politics, but sort of talking about politics, about how everyone's slinging mud back and forth, and there's fear and unknowing, and just with the political environment, how can we, as individuals, shift the consciousness universally about what's going on politically, especially in this country? And especially the fear base and
Well, there's several answers to that. The biggest first step is you have to set an example. Okay, when the stuff comes up, you have to analyze it, observe your response. If you have an emotion, start talking to yourself about why. This is this know yourself stuff that esoteric teachers have been spouting and rattling around for 40, 50,000 years now. Is they keep saying you got to know yourself. So why are you having an emotional response? Look at the facts. There's so many people who won't look at the facts. So then follow one of my other rules, which is don't accept the premise of the question. Are you going to vote for Trump or Hillary? Right? Premise of the question is, what if I don't want to vote for either? I don't believe in voting for the lesser of the evils, if both sides are evil. And they weren't. Right? So then you look at the so-called third-party candidates. All of them were pretty left. So maybe you don't vote for president that year because there's nobody worth your vote. And yeah, then you get the argument, well, you're just letting somebody else have it. That may be true, but you have to vote your conscience. So you have to set an example. When you hear fear-based garbage from friends, acquaintances, online, at restaurants, wherever you're at, is ask questions. Why do you think that? If you get in an argument, start telling people they're wrong, and here's why, they're going to not hear anything you say after you say, you're wrong. So ask questions. Learn to ask questions. Ask questions of yourself about these issues. One of the first questions you have when you see something stupid, idiotic, asinine, a new policy, a new statement by a politician, whatever it is ask yourself, what are they trying to distract me from this time?
Mhm.
Every time there's a major media hoopla over gay rights, lesbian rights, immigration, abortion, whatever, you find out a week or two later that in the dark of the night, Supreme Court justice was one, in the dark of the night, all these people who during the day in front of the cameras are arguing and can't agree on anything, they go into the Senate chambers, they go into the House of Representative chambers and make near unanimous votes on something else that's onerous to the American people. We can't afford, fill in the blank program, right? And we're giving hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign aid to countries all over the world. Another one of those. Oh, during the Supreme Court hoopla last fall. Oh, Trump signed a pardon for all the banks that we had bailed out, and then they wasted the money and committed fraud, and the Justice Department was going to prosecute them all. And that means it was a step towards what Iceland and a couple other countries are doing, which was putting all their bankers in jail and taking their countries back. So that process had started rolling, and Trump pardoned them all. The president's right to pardon people, which is pretty much an admission of crime. They hadn't even finished the trials yet. He's pardoning them. Whatever you did, you're pardoned. So you have to look behind that. The left hand, the right hand, they belong to the same puppet masters. Go look up all the people of the oligarchy. See what's really going on. And then we're going to do what the school is focusing on, which is, you guys should know because you're all supposed to be working on this, is picking an issue that's meaningful to you that you're going to spend perhaps years working on, which is you're going to create a new model of something that makes all the existing stuff obsolete. Maybe your deal is gas mileage standards and emission standards of automobiles. And you're going to come at, well, by golly, 100 years ago, they had patents for carburetors that gave 200 miles a gallon, which is true. Why can't we have that? Maybe that's your issue. But what's the new model? Isn't fighting them over these 100-year-old patents that they've buried. But you make internal combustion engines obsolete. I want my levitating Jetson car. We have all the technology on the shelf right now to have levitating Jetsons cars. Tesla invented it 100 years ago. And then he was murdered, and the government took all his papers, and they're using it for military use only. So there's a lot of ways to do that, but we have to come up with new models that make the old model obsolete. That was a lesson that I picked up over the years from Buckminster Fuller. He was a guy who invented the geodesic dome among many accomplishments. He's most famous for that. And his thought question when he did that was, how can we make a space out of the minimum material possible? Because you look at this house, and this is a 120 or more year old house, and it's got a foundation, and it's got big beams under the floors, and it's got big beams going up in these walls, and beams over here, and that's holding up. So you got all this huge structure to hold up a roof to keep you dry. And there's a lot of material that goes into this old style traditional building. So his idea is, how can we do that? How do we make the roof into a load-bearing wall? And he did the math, and he came up with the geodesic dome. It doesn't need any beams or supports inside because it's kind of like an eggshell which he used as his model. It transmits the load through the structure, and you have this huge space with nothing interfering. So that was a new model. And if you want to get online, you can go right now and you can buy a kit to make a dome and have a dome house put up in your yard. Right now. You can go buy it. It's available. Why they're not used more, I don't know.
Can't hang pictures on the wall.
You can if you learn to levitate them. So does that answer your question? At least partway. I mean, it's obviously a long conversation, but
Yeah.
but know yourself. Don't buy into the fear. And you hear and see a lot of fear out there. Society is behaving a lot like a cell, a single cell in an organism that's in the early stages of cell division. If you ever watched, you can probably find YouTube videos, I've never looked, for a cell undergoing the process called mitosis, where this cell divides and the internal chaos and everything then gets horribly ripped apart, and then it boing, 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 and you've got two cells that will realign and everything will be fine. At a cellular level, the process of growth is very disruptive and very chaotic. And from the standpoint of a cell, it's, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's happening to me? Somebody make it stop. So you see this polarization, because what happens when the cell undergoes is everything lines up on one side or the other, very polar, then the cell splits after the DNA replicates, and then everything realigns and readjusts. So society can't grow. We can't make those new steps and keep everything stagnant and comfortable. I promised everyone who went through the level 4 class that they needed to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And just because the level 4 class was over doesn't mean that concept gets to be turned off. In fact, if anything, it needs to be turned up.
We'll have deep asks. So how do we learn to levitate stuff?
How to learn to levitate stuff. You have to study a little bit of physics, and then you have to start reading Tesla's papers, which I am doing in my spare time. I've got 3 or 4 books of Tesla material here. And I've got 3 or 4 other websites I follow because it's pertains to plasma physics and it pertains to warp drive. And I have a contact who shall remain nameless who has developed all the designs for true warp drive engines. And this is somebody whose designs NASA's trying to borrow. Yeah, we literally have warp drive right now if we wanted to do it.
What about electromagnetism
Well, that's a pretty broad topic.
for levitation?
Yeah, the magnetism part in particular is crucial for that. So yeah, the technology exists right now, and the technology that exists may not be the most efficient. I mean, we've barely touched it, right? Look how computers have boomed in the last 25 years. When we've got not just a few dozen or a few hundred people inventing and designing, but when you get hundreds of thousands of people designing, you get that synergy effect. You know, that little laptop right there that we're using as our broadcast computer is more powerful than the computers that used to fill rooms that did all the calculations to fly to the moon. So yeah, next time you're over in Wadid, I'll show you my collection of books and you can start reading them.
She also mentions every time I start to get comfortable, everything gets kicked up a notch. It never stops.
Right.
Yep.
Good. Then you're on track. And you're on track and on purpose. Excellent. Glad to hear it. Like I warned you, I promise. You can't make the progress for humanity and remain comfortable. And you shouldn't even desire comfort. When we put you in a box and bury you in the ground, you'll be comfortable. Or at least what's left of your physical body will be comfortable. You yourself will be going through the Bardos, which I guarantee you won't be comfortable. And the radiations that you experience when we do these shamanic events will be nothing compared to the radiations of the Bardos. What do you think this is practice for?
Mhm.
You know, this is practice for learning to navigate the macro dimensions, as any good shaman needs to learn to do. So the material I was going to talk about last week, I wanted to get to at least a part of it. And it has to do with how the Akadua actually works from an engineering physics point of view, at least part of it. So I'm going to draw pictures. So I'm going to draw and then I'll hold them up because I can't really turn around and draw on the board like this was a real classroom.
We need to manifest a real classroom.
Mhm.
So, okay, everybody, what's that?
Away
A
from
wave,
What kind?
a wavelength,
osculating.
a heartbeat. No.
It's a sine wave. It's a representation of harmonic motion. Everything in nature does this. Everything. Now, when you hook up an oscilloscope to anything, you're going to see all kinds of complex and elegant waveforms, which ultimately can all be added and subtracted by combining multiple waveforms to produce whatever form you actually want. So when we send television signals or radio signals or cell phone signals out in the universe, there's a sine wave that we call the carrier wave. And then that's when you lock on it. When you see signal strength and the bars on your phone, that's telling you how strong is this background sine wave. And then you can have other waves that get added in. So that's called a square wave, which when you break it down is actually many, many sine waves added together. That's how you make a square wave. If you're a geeky electrical engineer, you get really excited about proving that. When you're a physicist, like I was, you go, it's a square wave, right? Got it. Let's move on. So what happens when you combine these two, right? You get a sine wave with ditsies in it.
I thought a ditz was a person.
Yeah, well, there you go thinking again. It's easier to do it this way. So you get something where the core waveform is shown these little red things. You get ups and downs that generally follow the sine wave. This is the data, the ones and zeros, the information. And the process of combining these is known as, in physics terms, as constructive interference, but in engineering terms, it's simply known as multiplexing. You take multiple signals, and you combine them into one signal. And then the guy listening at the other end knows what the carrier wave is, and so he subtracts out the carrier wave and reassembles the data. And that's how the computer knows what to do when you hit send and the email goes out, or when you send a command to the satellite, says, okay, now deploy your solar arrays. Boom, okay, they're deployed, great. You know, that's all working, and so forth. So, a background signal and information. Engineers do this every day. You actually do it every day when you pick up your cell phone and you go, do, 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 do. Right? This is what you're actually doing. You may not have realized it, but that's how your phone works. This is how Akadua works. Where does the carrier wave come from?
Background field of the universe.
Yeah. The carrier wave, we're tapped into the background field of the universe, which is that unity uttermost shown aspect of the Akadwa. It's tapped into source directly. It's pure raw power and energy at one level.
Can you tilt a little bit, because it's picking up a glare
Oh,
off
okay.
of that.
Is this better?
That's
I'm
much
sorry.
better, yeah.
Yang.
Okay.
So it's power. We feel it. When you use the Akadwa for a while, you're going to sense it. You're going to feel it. People you work with on it, animals can sense it. They don't know about the arguments that subtle energies can't exist because they don't have opposable thumbs and they never read that book. So this upper so the sine, that's the raw power portion. Where does the data portion come from in the Akadwa signals?
You said come from.
What originates that part?
Some kind of programmable information.
Is it
So it
when
has
we
to be-
receive the transmission?
It's coming from the universe.
But this is coming
Source.
from an oscillating source in
I wanna-
frequency and wavelength. That's the data. So the data must be able to be programmable and reprogrammable.
How? It's real simple.
Consciousness.
How? The answer to your question is yes. Whose consciousness?
Well, creators,
That's part of it,
and your true will.
almost. You're doing a healing on someone.
Right?
Okay.
You're going to send something to them.
Intention.
Yes.
Intention.
Ding, 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 ding. Your intent creates this automatically.
Wow.
When you have an intent to heal this, to clear that, to tonify this, it's your intent that generates this and merges it with the Akadwa. Now, the beauty of the Akadwa is that this is horribly oversimplified, right? Because we have 7 main frequencies, and each one of those can then have a data stream on top of it. So right away, we're up to a minimum of 14 data streams, potentially. And it all goes towards your intent and how successful you are at learning to do this. Question?
So then the frequencies then, because that's the part that I was thinking of before I just started saying that, if the frequencies are a substance of its own in oscillating waveform with light, with sound, because they're different frequencies, right? So the data is programmed with the frequencies? Like, is that how the frequencies end up going into the waveform? Or is it vice versa? Is it already, like, does it really exist and then it's programmed into a frequency?
You kind of lost me, but I think one of the things I want to talk about is, let's say, can somebody grab me a paper towel?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a real eraser for these things.
We're gonna have to get you guys a brace.
Okay.
So
I wanna
basically, like, is the frequency in existence in waveform first and then programmed into the data? Or does it exist because it's programmable data and it programs into
Thank you.
frequency?
I'm going to just draw a few because I don't have enough colors.
Can I make a stab at what I think at least to break it down?
Yeah.
So the sub-frequencies would be like a spectrum. So that they're already a spectrum of the frequency that's coming through. It's just like when we put it in front of a prism and we can see all the colors, we've just broken it down. The intention part of that means that what we apply with our consciousness when we're using that particular frequency is programmable.
Puts it into a different kind of form almost.
So like when I engage with Jaguar, I'm going to be having a different intent and putting different information into that than you would. but ultimately we're still tapping into the same frequency.
So it's
Okay.
a different frequency on top of a frequency.
Yeah. And then there's more frequencies.
Yeah.
So
Just to
this
remember.
is my current theory. And I don't claim this is proven. I don't claim that this is the whole theory in its completeness. I only drew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these instead of 7 because I was running out of pens. So suppose each one of these 5 is a different Akadwa frequency, like maybe
Okay.
solar, lunar,
Right.
atmospheric, oceanic, obsidian, and volcanic, and unnamed. And so they each have a different wavelength, and they're being propagated at the same speed, which gives them all a slightly different frequency. But when you merge it all into one waveform, when you add all this up, you're going to get some kind of a composite waveform that is the core waveform for Akadwa as a whole. Okay? Now then, I think what you were asking then is when you learn to get your level 2 and you separate these frequencies out, each one of them might have its own version of ones and zeros. Right?
Yeah.
All the way through. And I do this a lot especially when I split it into yin and yang. And I'm sending I'm doing one thing with one and one thing with the other. I typically send the yang frequencies with my right hand and the yin frequencies my left hand to the same place at the same time. And then I'm also sending from other parts of my body sometimes when I'm doing shamanic healings. But each one of these 7 main subfrequencies could potentially be carrying a different data stream. And if you get really good with your concentration and your consciousness and your ability to hold your intent, this could all happen all at the same time.
That was my next question. So then, because they're all part of the same energy signature originally in substance form, when they get broken down into their own individual coding, does each wavelength in individual coding still have remnants of the whole encoding?
Yeah.
I don't think, no, it shouldn't if you do it right. The whole will have pieces of all of these. But if you separate out, let's say this is volcanic, then you should only have volcanic. And you should only have whatever kind of instruction you're sending with volcanic. Volcanic, of course, is second chakra, so that's your adrenal glands. A lot of people have worn out adrenal glands, so I use volcanic on the adrenal glands to tonify and rebuild and refill. The adrenal glands are the yang side of what the Chinese medicine call the kidney, whereas the kidney is the yin side. And so at the same time, people can have burned out yang energy from their adrenals at the same time burned out yin energy. Because the kidney, the yin part of the kidney, has other functions to control the body with hormones and things like that. So it's more substance based. So I'll send left hand to the kidney with yin and right hand to the adrenal with yang, carrying different instructions. So in answer to Mwajid's question about how to levitate is, yeah, it's possible. I don't have every bit of paper that Tesla produced because those were stolen. But whether you're going to look at levitation and Tesla technology, or whether you're going to look at Akadwa and waveforms, a certain level of basic knowledge about physics is essential. This should have been taught freshman year of high school. Mostly it isn't. Mostly they don't teach physics until senior year of high school, and it's too late. I had the great honor to meet a physicist named Leon Lederman, who was a Nobel Prize winner. He won for high energy physics work, and then he switched over to science education as his big thing he did late in life. I don't even know if he's still alive. He was getting old when I met him, and I met him when I was teaching physics at a community college in Arizona, and he was it was mainly for high schools. He was his target was a program called Physics First. You teach introductory physics at a really simple level of math in grade 9. And the rationale he came up with was the traditional order of sciences in high schools: biology, then chemistry, then physics. And there's 2 reasons, and different schools had one or the other. One was that's alphabetical, and that's their only logic behind it. And he did research literally all over the country, and he talked to hundreds of high schools, and that was their answer, because that's alphabetical. A roughly equal percentage of the high schools chose it because of math. Biology had minimal math requirements, chemistry a little more, and to do physics you really need calculus, right? And at least trig at high school level. And so they don't have those yet, so teach physics last. Well, what he did, and he tested this in about 500 high schools nationwide. Freshman year you teach introductory physics, just the math of algebra. Just get the basic principles out, like what's a wave? How do you add waves? What's a vector? All these simple basic things. Because chemistry then relies on basic definitions from physics, like what's an electron? What's an ion? Okay, so then people who did that form of physics first did better with chemistry. And then of course biology relies on a thorough knowledge of chemistry, because you can't even talk about a cell unless you know chemistry first. And then what he found was everybody's grades in science, all sciences, got better. More people took elective science both in high school and in college. More people went to college by taking physics first in their 9th grade class. More people graduated high school when they took physics first. Every outcome you could imagine gets better when you teach physics first. So this is 9th grade physics. If you want to read a book on how to understand all this conceptually, and it's not one you have to read beginning to end, and you just pick and choose subjects, there's a book written by Isaac Asimov called Understanding Physics.
Can you spell his last name? I'm sorry to
Assimov. He was the first author to ever publish a book in every category of the Dewey Decimal System. Guy was a brilliant dude. And anyway, his textbook, it's not even a textbook, it's this thick. It was originally published in 3 volumes, and it was published as 1. And it's plain language. I learned a lot on how to write science for non-scientists by reading Isaac's writings, not just in physics, but in other things. And it's very simply explained. He agrees with Richard Feynman, who was another Nobel Prize-winning physicist, that if you can't explain it simply, we really don't know it, and therefore we shouldn't be teaching it. That's what Feynman would say about subjects. And he was a smart guy. So, do we have a question?
Yeah. So Sarah's asking, what about using the Akadwa for levitation? And I have 3 comments that I'd like to either, I don't know if they're questions or just comments, but if I can remember them all, because I didn't bring my journal. First of all, I think I've demonstrated before how in the dreaming Coyote taught me to fly, which was basically, shooting the Akadwa straight down, in which case you're levitating at least, several inches to feet off the ground, in an energetic body. But because of the kind of condition that I have where I feel a lot of times like gravity is compressing me, especially on my spine and everything, and the times that I can't walk, there's times where I'm using the Akadwa to actually propel myself. You guys saw that at the level 4 when I kind of flew from the kitchen out into the living room. It was just like, oh, okay. That was the Akadwa that I was using to move my body, and I used a lot for that purpose. So that was one comment. The next comment is, this is a little funny, but how many of you remember that, let me turn this on myself. How many of you remember that cult game that we were supposedly playing, as young adults, young teenagers and stuff, where you were supposed to put 2 fingers underneath somebody and be able to make them levitate.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to the audience is, has anybody ever actually seen that work? So what I'm thinking in like, if I was going to be doing a test now and I wanted to apply some of these physics principles, and this is why I brought up the electromagnetism, is that some of the adjustments that I would make to that now is to alternate masculine, feminine energies in a circle,
Mhm.
and with people using the Akadwa, and certain breathing and relaxation techniques for the person who was experiencing it. Theoretically, I would think it should work. And I don't know what the rules of it were, how many people you had to actually have doing it to make it work and all of that, which the number in the circle would have to be, right. So there's both magical and scientific principles now that I would look at applying to that as a test experiment as to whether that was just urban legend or if it's something that could be done to show, at least prove on a small scale that levitation is possible. And the third thought that I had was that if we really believe that, at least from a spiritual or magical or even scientific standpoint, that these things are possible, we also need to remember that those things are made available to us when we need them. It's not a goal in and of itself to learn how to levitate. You levitate because you have a need in the moment to be able to do that, and in many, many forms, systems, traditions, we're promised that when we are there and we need to act, that we'll be given the skills that we need to do what we need to do.
Yeah, like when you lifted up a car.
Right. Well, there's that.
So
I ran over my cat and I had to lift the car off of her.
yeah, she lifted a car.
I can't believe it.
And now here she is, 20 years later, can't figure out why her body's broken.
Right.
So let me address Muad'Dib's question. I believe that it should be possible. I don't have that formula down yet. I've been working on other things. So I also haven't had enough people to play ball with to talk about physics to. Okay, when I came along and joined Coyote School, I was the first one of his, at that time, 30 more students who knew anything about physics that he could talk to about physics. So when Coyote and I get together, we usually have a block of time that we set apart to talk about physics. And now I've got somebody else over here to talk about physics too. And since Sarah's interested, I'm going to get her going on the Asimov books and my Tesla books and a couple other things. And yeah, let's play physics.
I'm interested too.
Okay, Asimov. Start with Asimov. And you got to have a little bit of basic math. You got to at least have algebra.
What about for those who are just completely resistant or clueless, what about like Wu Li Masters, just to break them into the concepts?
There's 2 books I like in that genre. And the genre being, how do you explain the physics of higher level principles like spirituality? And the Dancing Wu Li Masters by, what's his bucket? Gary Zukav is an outstanding book in that regard. And the other one that I like, that I actually started with first, is called The Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra. And it's a little more left-brained. And the Dancing Wu Li Masters is a little more right-brained. So by now in your life, I hope you know which you are.
This is a test.
So if you consider yourself right-brained, I would say go start with the Capra book.
Oh.
And if you're more left-brained, go start with the Dancing Wu Li Masters book. Do the opposite. Then go read the other. We need to build that balance, right? It's just a little thing. You're not going to get graded down if you read the one that you resonate with most first, but it's very common to force you to go fill in those left brain gaps and right brain gaps. You know, when I started on this whole process 25 years ago, I'm coming at it as a rocket scientist would, because at the time I was working as a rocket scientist. So all my spiritual teachers forced me to go do right brain stuff. And it's like, oh, my head hurts. But I wouldn't have gotten where I'm at if I had just ignored that and only done what I was comfortable with. It's that whole comfortable thing
Can I
again.
ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Speaking of the comfortable thing, you mentioned that Coyote, after 30 years, finally found someone who he could speak physics to
Mhm.
in the school and in his programming and in his teaching. Why didn't he ever teach the students physics in this aspect of
Why didn't he ever go there?
Yeah, why didn't he teach anyone or share the physics aspect?
There has to be he had a very different style of teaching. Okay, he's a Coyote medicine guy, right? And he was working with people at the time who were all very, very young, late teens, early 20s. That was 15 years ago. Now they're into their mid 30s. Now they're getting to the point where they can start learning things, right? It took them a while. He was teaching them really ground level basics. And now he's got an incredible example of patience for me, because patience was one of my hot buttons. It's like, what the heck are you doing? You know, kind of patience. And when you understand the rocket science industry, you understand why I'm that way. You have to do stuff right now, or the rocket blows up. So you have when something bad starts to go on, you've got maybe that long to have the right answer, and it can't be a guess. That's the way I was trained. So in this narrow field, you have to be an expert and perfect at everything. And when you're not, things blow up, and if they have people in them, they die. And I watched that happen. It's no fun. I don't recommend it. So Coyote was dealing with a lot of people, none of whom had math and science backgrounds. Not a one. Not a one. When I showed up. And the very first day I met him, I was introduced to him by Oria over here. And, oh, hi, tell me about yourself. We get talking. Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then he heard that I was teaching a class on the physics of chi, aimed at acupuncturists on how meridians actually work. He got very interested. He's basically stopped the whole school. He had his students bring a couple of chairs. We sat down right in the middle of the room. He had them bring us drinks. We sat down there. We had a conversation for about a half hour. He was great. He said, thank you very much. We went our way. I had no idea that was at all unusual. Oh, he's very nice. I liked him. Yeah, we can talk about physics. This is great. A couple years later, we were sitting around after a sweat lodge one night, and somebody remembered that. And it turns out a large portion of the school was angry. He never does that to strangers. He never talks about physics to us. Coyote looked at whoever it was that said that and said, I can't talk to you about physics. None of you know anything about physics. Arlen was the first person to show up who knew anything about physics. And they're like, oh, well, never mind. You know. So he was taking a group of raw beginners on a journey. And he picked that kind of people. He tried to attract that kind of people. And he mostly got that kind of people because they didn't have to unlearn 30 or 40 years of garbage. I got into it I only had to unlearn 10 or 20 years of garbage, which is why I've been able to progress. If I had 40 years of garbage to unlearn, maybe I would never have gotten here. So this basic level of science is our best model of how the universe works. And there's a lot of things it explains very accurately. I mean, you can go out and watch the waterways come in. You can calculate wave speed and all that stuff. Just go to the beach with a stopwatch. Actually, your phone probably has a stopwatch. And you can learn a lot just by observing nature around you and the physics. That's why you can look at the clouds and say, oh, they're harping us again today because look at the interference pattern. So the way we use that knowledge, was there another question over here? Comments? Okay. The way we use that information about multiplexing signals and combining data with your intent, with the carrier wave of the Akadwa, whichever frequencies you're using, always remember that in addition to your intent, there is the higher intent from the source that is also in there, not just raw power. In the Toltec lineage, we talk about the creation of artifacts. It's not just a piece of art. It carries a message. So when the artist is creating it, Yvonne, little eagle, can you take care of this?
Sure.
Thank you. From the moment of creation, let's say he's going to make a sculpture, he's just got a square block to start with. And he's going to make it into a statue, and then the statue is going to carry information forward in time. As he carves it, he's holding his intent. He's sending energy to it the whole time. When it's done, we have ways of charging that so that energy and information will be there even thousands of years into the future. And you can come along and access that information. There will usually be clues in the art for how to do that, what frequencies to use, and other clues that are necessary. And this is how we do that. If we're going to send healing to someone, a hurt animal, a sick friend, we can send instructions into the body's energy system. Keep in mind, the body runs on energy. That's what the meridians are about, the chakras are about, all the acupoints. And you can access those with the Akadwa and send messages to individual organs and individual cells. You're only limited by your ability to talk to this person's higher self, their body, talk to their organs, talk to their cells and say, yo, liver, what's up? She's eating that icky stuff again. And you look at say, what did you eat that you weren't supposed to? How did you know? Well, your liver just told me. And they think you're making it up. But it's like, nope, your liver just told me. So I like including some of the basic scientific knowledge in our study of Akadwa and in our study of shamanism in general as a whole. And we are at a point where we can no longer rely on being unscientific. I don't bow down before science as the great god of modern society and expect everybody to believe something I say just because I throw in the suffix, it's scientific at the end. Oh, go do this because it's scientific. Oh, okay, scientific. And you see that in the media a lot. Modern science says, and it's utter BS, whatever they're saying. But I like including that because we're dealing with a society that is or used to be raised in accurate science, and it's a valuable tool for investigating the universe. The problem that I see with science is they've basically painted themselves into a corner, figuratively speaking, in that they've talked themselves into a situation where they only believe certain things when they're convenient, basically. And if it isn't proven with X amount of studies, then it's not real. We may not have the full explanation, but we're measuring it. It's happening. So existing theories don't explain it. We need a new theory. And there's this wall, this mental wall that has been created, where science is no longer scientific. And in one of my books that's about to be released, I basically make the claim that shamanism is more scientific than science, because we aren't systematically leaving out 85% of the universe the way science is. And that's the honest truth. Science doesn't acknowledge anything to do with the higher planes. They have words for theories that require more dimensions, and they're basically derogatory terms for any of those theories, even though Einstein's theories show that there's multiple dimensions. A lot of science in the world of modern physics is predicting something on the order of 19 dimensions. Well, people don't know what to do with that information, at least not in the world of science. Certainly not in the world of anything else academic. Go talk to a shaman and we go, yeah, that's about right. But I don't limit myself to only 19 as being the theoretical limit. That, based on the math, that seems to fall into the category of the preponderance of evidence standard. Most theories come up with a number around 19 plus or minus 1 for the number of dimensions. Might be less, might be a lot more. And I think the universe is growing, and that number of 19 may grow in time as the universe grows and expands. Question?
So kind of going back to Nina's comment about why Coyote would not have, trained his students in physics. I think this is part of it is just, as a general society, we're not literate enough in the sciences to even know or want to go there. But I think that where we're writing this line, and I think this is more of the tool that he employs, is the use of alchemy and magic. And so magic simply being those phenomenon that can't be explained right now through modern science, get kind of put into this, magical box. But, alchemy and astrology and all of that is highly scientific when we take it seriously and we do those kind of things. So there's this, I think that's more of the tool that is used in that school for teaching these subjects, because quite frankly, when we're talking about like the Akadua, a subtle energy that even modern science chooses not to try to justify because it upsets their apple cart, shows the limitations of science, and both in the understanding of these things and the practical engagement with them.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Coyote does use the alchemical systems, the Western magical systems, in a very rigorous scientific manner, and that's one of his 3 lineages he's initiated into, is the Toltec, the alchemical, and the yoga lineages. So he's holding, he's a torchbearer, I guess you could say, for 3 lineages. One's a lot, so he has my admiration for doing 3. of course, there's still, Coyote, that question of how many herbs do you know, Coyote?
Don't mess with the farmer.
Right?
Telling you. Question?
Yes, I have a question about, well, this is my thoughts on the waves.
Mhm.
Okay, that, well, not only is it the waves with it, but it deals with the Cohen rays and the laws of the rays.
Yeah.
And, universal laws above, below.
Right.
Intent, true will, assemblage point.
So what's your question?
Well, but it's, if you use those, all those things in the waves to direct it, like you're the pilot or the driver or whatever, and then it would be more powerful, or I don't know how,
Successful, maybe?
yeah, successful.
Maybe or maybe not. The first thing that comes to my mind is yes, all those things are true. The as above, so below is a simple physics phenomenon known as octaval resonance, 1 octave up, a ratio of 1 to 2 on frequencies between octaves. The Cohen rays, all those other things, yeah, the whole universe works on frequency. In the Kabbalion, an alchemical text, says everything vibrates, everything moves. Modern physics, we say everything vibrates, everything moves. It's, modern physics here in the 20th and 21st century is catching up to what the ancient writers knew 10,000 years ago or more.
So basically, we're like the orchestra leader, and I mean, it's like
Mhm.
how the Easter Island, the legend is that they move themselves, the stones.
Right, they levitated them
Yeah,
with some kind of
right.
technology. I mean, there's so many examples of what we don't know out there. There's megalithic structures on every continent, with the possible exception of Antarctica, which is buried under ice, so we don't know, where there are individual stones in these megalithic structures that weigh so much, they exceed the lifting capacity of any modern construction cranes that we have, even if you could get those cranes to those sites, which we can't. They're 10,000 feet up a mountain. They're up on the shores of Lake Titicaca. They're all over. We saw one of them in the Orkney Islands at the Mays Howe site, which is a chambered cairn, and in the tunnel entrance, there's a stone that's like 40, 50 feet long, X feet high and X feet wide, and the weight is such that today, right now, nobody could lift that and keep it in one piece. And yet there it was, easily constructed into this ancient structure. So the question becomes, like using your orchestra analogy, when you're playing a symphony orchestra, is every instrument in the orchestra playing a note every moment of the whole time? That's a question to you. Is it or is it not?
There's silence between them.
There's silences, there's rests, there's pauses.
Right.
Here's where the clarinets do their thing, here's where the tubas do their thing, here's where the strings do, and then sometimes at the finale, everybody's playing, but they're not playing every possible note that each instrument can make. It would be utter chaos if you did that. So when we start using the Akadua and combining it with all these other things, well, it's theoretically possible. I don't know that it's going to always be beneficial. It'll depend on what you, as the shaman, want to do. What is your intent? As you learn, as you meditate, as you get guidance from your angel and you connect with all the other guides that say, oh, you want to learn how to combine frequencies for healing? Here, talk to this person who's in spirit. And then you put together what's necessary for your intent. So that just sounded like a lot.
No, I thought it came out good. One comment though is that you mentioned the word, you know, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but to use these things to make this one thing happen. Okay, so it almost felt like forcing it. You see what I mean?
No, I don't mean force
Right.
it, it's to play with it.
Right. So we you know, because of the ethics aspect of the Akadua, we don't necessarily want to force things and just you know, I've had some experience working with the elements of kind of calling clouds in and creating rain, but the clouds often already have to be there on the horizon. There already needs to be currents to work with. So we're working with these flows of the waveforms. No, and then over time we might be able to shift their frequency, but we would need to have a really good intent that would be in the benefit of all beings everywhere.
Right.
Because just because I want it to rain here doesn't mean, you know, I get preferential treatment in the cosmos because I did the right little rain dance or incantation or whatever it is, you know, to force something to happen here when, you know, some other place really was slotted to receive that rain. So there's already a natural balance, and unfortunately, the evil men that conspire in these days are interfering with some of those flows. And this is part of what I think you're talking about when we're trying to put out new information into the collective consciousness to affect a more positive vibration, because there's so much negative vibration going in there.
Right.
But I think we do always want to keep that idea of the benefit of all beings and the ethics of not interfering with the will of others.
Right. Well, it's just like in healing, I figured out that I could have my Akata assemblage point talk with who I'm working with at assemblage point and do energy that way.
There is a way to do that.
Yeah.
And I teach that class a little later.
Well, I've been playing with it. And
Okay.
it
Well,
works.
then talk to me afterwards,
Okay.
because you can mess things up if you don't know how to do it right.
Okay.
All right. The Akadua is tapped into the universal source. That's what the name implies, unity uttermost shown, which is one of the two translations of Akadua. The other is innermost light, so that unity emerges from within us. It becomes our innermost light, and by receiving the Akadua, we are now tapped into the highest source there is more strongly than you were before. Otherwise, why bother with the Akadua? It works, right? And it's an incredible gift that has been returned to humanity in this time frame. It used to be here. It was part of what was taken away and withheld. And it has been hidden for a long time until Coyote was directed to release it again. And like any of the other skills we've taught over time at workshops and seminars, it only works if you use it. Does everybody remember the oath from when you got the Akadua?
Just gave it away a couple minutes ago.
What is the oath?
Maybe, I will use the Akadua for the benefit of all beings everywhere.
Yeah, we wish to use the Akadua for the benefit of all beings everywhere. What do you think that means?
All beings.
All beings.
Everywhere.
It's
Everywhere.
ethics.
What else?
Well, not just beings like in physical form, because physical forms have consciousness as well, like crystals, water, dirt, microorganisms.
What else? Can you tell me about the oath? Anybody online?
Do no wrong or no harm.
That's the one most people think of, right? You won't use it for harm. You won't interfere with someone else's
It's
will.
True will, yeah.
All right, that's the one that we most think of. Is don't use it for evil purpose. What's the other interpretation of this oath?
Well, that we're not just using this for ourselves, we're using this to benefit
Everyone.
everyone.
You can use it to benefit yourself, and don't limit it to that, right? What else? There's another piece of this puzzle that I think most of you aren't getting.
The aspect of source.
No.
Well, I mean, the whole insinuation of an oath is that you're taking responsibility.
Yeah, that's not what I'm looking at. Okay. The oath is use the Akadwa for the benefit of all beings therein. We have to use it. It does no good and has no benefit to any being anywhere if you don't use it.
True.
Use the Akadwa. Yes, for the benefit of all beings everywhere. Yes, don't harm anyone. Don't violate their true will. But use it. This is intended to be used. If somebody walks in and gives you the secrets to the universe and you go, oh, that's nice, I'll just set that over there. Oh, where was my comic book? Oh, here, let me just... Use this. The only thing you don't use it on is to harm others. Other than that, go forth and use it. You want to use it to enhance your art? I've seen what some of that can look like. Amazing. Use it to heal people. Use it to heal animals. Use it to heal the earth. Use it to build statues that carry messages forward for millennia. Use it when you play your music. Add an intent there that anyone who hears that music may not even be consciously aware of, but they're going to get something out of that. Use it the way Coyote does and Phyllis, one of the other level 5s, when they do the telling, that Toltec art form. Use it when you prepare food to take a mundane meal into the ambrosia of the gods, the way Bonnie does, Ori Lux here. When she prepares an Akadwized meal with an intent, it's food that you would never, ever in your life believe could exist here on earth. You feel like you're tasting a bite of heaven with her food. Use it. As long as you don't violate that oath by impressing your will on someone else against theirs, and you're not going to go down the dark path like Darth Vader. You're going to be that pure Obi-Wan. Then use it. Absolutely, positively use it. That's what we have it for. There's so much evil going on in the world that if I decide to call in rain here because they're harping us and we don't have any and we need it, I'm not even going to worry about anything else. You know, if you figure out the right batch of Akadwa frequencies and the right number of people in the right places to completely shut down the worldwide harp systems and neutralize every bit of that, great, go do it.
Use it.
Use it for the benefit of all beings everywhere. That's the key, is use it. We need humanity using the Akadwa. So the Florida gang, we need you to use it. We need to get you guys up to level 3s, some of you, so we start spreading it in Florida. So hurry. Some of you down in San Ramon who are at level 2, we need to get you up to level 3s so we can start spreading it more down there. Boy, does the Bay Area need help. Boy. May, I don't remember the date, but it'll probably be up on the website. I don't think it's quite there yet. We have a level 3 class in May. That means if you want to come to the level 3 class in May, between now and then you need to get your level 2. Level 2, well, let me just back up. Every level of the Ikadwa I thought was amazing. I've done 1 through 5, and every single one was amazing. I thought level 1 was blow me away amazing until I got level 2. It's like, holy moly. And then level 3 was, And then 4, 5, same thing. It just keeps getting better. But the nice thing about level 2 in particular is then you get full access to all of the subfrequencies. And then your amount of flexibility goes way up. I think I did the math with the 7 individual frequencies. I think it's 127 different combinations are possible with those 7 frequencies, which is really cool. That's a lot.
The date for the next level 3 here in Northern California is May 18th.
Oh, that's right. Mount St. Helens Day.
It's a great day to come to Shasta Town.
Everybody thinks that.
Yeah, come to Mount Shasta on the anniversary of one of our Northwest volcanoes blowing up. We didn't actually plan that, but I think it's kind of cool. As I am a card-carrying survivor of the Mount St. Helens eruption.
Wow.
So I didn't get that much ash dumped on me, but I got ash dumped on me. I was in Walla Walla, which was, if you look at the map, right at the edge of the cloud. But I had to go sweep my car off. Yeah, Mount St. Helens. Good times. Except for the stupid loggers who wouldn't leave. I say good times now because that's looking back at what, 30, how many years?
It's been a while.
It was 80?
1980. So that's 38 years ago. Yeah. Any questions on the physics and how to use that for the Ikadwa before I move on to something else?
Well, I would just like to say that a lot of the physics of subtle energies and the physics of the Ikadwa are covered in our level 1 class.
Yeah. We talk about that. So even if you hold a level 1 and you want to come take the class and get a little more in-depth training, you're welcome to. We have a price that you've already paid for your transmission. You don't have to pay for that again. You just come take the instruction. And that's March 30th here in Mount Shasta. So just let us know if you're interested. In case you haven't noticed, we alluded to it earlier, but the world is changing. The world is changing. Why? It's all physics.
Because everything is always in motion.
Yeah, everything's vibrating and motion. Yeah. So our solar system, the sun and all its planets, orbits our galaxy, which we call the Milky Way galaxy, once every 26,000 years. There are in nature 12 core rays of energy that are used by the structure of the universe to animate the universe. Here on Earth, those 12 energies mostly manifest, and one of the ways they manifest is through your astrological sign and the energies that vary as we go through the year. At the level of the galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy, those 12 rays or energies manifest in what we call an aeon. So you take 26,000 years, actually it's 25,900 and change, and you divide it by 12, you come up with a number that's somewhere between 2,000 and 2,100. And that's the length of time that is an aeon. And as we move through, as we orbit the galaxy, we move through these 12 energies. And this has been known way, way back. Some of the Indian texts from India talk about it. The Vedas, I believe, talk about it, and the Upanishads talk about it. And I don't know what else because I'm not an expert at that literature. We are passing through a transition phase from one aeon into another. In astrology, we've left the age of Pisces and we're entering the age of Aquarius. And then you get the great Fifth Dimension song, The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius, and no group of astronomers and or astrologers has yet agreed on a definition of exactly when that transition takes place. But by the preponderance of evidence, it's a process that might be about 100 years long, and we're at least mostly through that 100 years. Did we pass out of it completely? Nobody can agree. So we're kind of sort of at the beginning of the age of Aquarius. And so one of the things that's happening right now is our solar system is passing through an area of increased radiation. Now, astronomers will talk about it as the flux of cosmic rays that come from the sun, they come from the background field of space, and it's been described as a photon belt. And those increased radiations are believed to be part of what's affecting the Schumann resonance. Does everybody know what the Schumann resonance is?
Isn't that what we're supposed to be visualizing when we are healing the
Partly,
world?
yeah. Our Earth's magnetic field creates a layer. It's basically, there's like outside the surface of the Earth, there's a magnetic shell, and inside that magnetic shell, there's certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation that resonate at certain key frequencies that mimic some of our core brainwave frequencies. So a part of our intelligence is attuned to this planet. That's because the biological machines that we're occupying, that's these things, these machines evolved in this planet. When our essence comes in, our essence is from somewhere else, so we've got to try to match frequencies. Part of human evolution is aimed at evolving, not the biological machine, but the essence. By the essence coming in, we get things done here that we can't out there at the higher planes. And so over time, the human race is evolving to have a more complex nervous system so that when we incarnate, we can evolve our essences faster. And using techniques such as the Toltec techniques, we can accelerate and get things done in one lifetime that used to take many. So this is some of the potential work that we have available to us that we're endeavoring to accomplish. So this photon belt is part of what's changing the frequencies of human consciousness. in a way, it's part of what's waking up the population, which in turn are the same reasons of why so many people in our world are in turmoil right now, although they couldn't really tell you why. It's that sense of agitation, those frequencies, those vibrations, those radiations that those of you who hang out in the Toltec school long enough, you will experience more and more. Those of you who went through the level 4 are very well acquainted with them. You're welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
More, please.
Yep.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
As long as they're not rocks, we'll take it.
We need to talk about this afterwards.
Ask and you shall be given.
Uh-oh, it's working already. That's good.
So, part of our job in this lineage is to be aware of the fact that this is what's going on for society. And whenever things are in turmoil in a group, what's the number one response, most common response of individuals and their groups as a whole?
Run away!
Yeah. It's fear, right? So you look around the world, you see fear. You smell fear. It's there. You can see it, not just in behavior, but you can see the waveforms of fear. You can smell it. You can taste it. You smell that fear. So our job is to neutralize that to the greatest extent possible. So how do we do that?
Love is the law.
That's 2 ding ding dingies.
Yay!
Get brownie buttons. Wait till later.
Right?
Must be married to the shaman or something.
Love.
I want a ding ding.
Love is the answer. Love is the frequency that neutralizes fear. And I'm not talking about the lower emotion of love. I'm not talking about that at all. Some of you may have read the Bible at one point, and what is the one commandment Christ said? It's like, okay, old Mosaic law thrown out, this new commandment I give unto you. To love one another as I have loved you. And he wasn't talking about camaraderie or agape. He was talking very specifically about a frequency of energy, a frequency of radiation, the frequency of a fully balanced, fully empowered heart chakra projected outwards. So when we love someone as Christ loved them, we're literally zapping them with the love rays.
The Christian right seem to have forgotten that.
Well, I would call it the Christian wrong.
Right. There's a lot of things.
There's a lot of things going on in the world by people purporting to be Christians that when you go read the Bible, and especially what are called the red letter editions, where everything Christ actually said is printed in red ink, 100% in the wrong direction. Christ said, do this. They said, don't do that. He said, never do this. They say, always do that. And that's been going on since the time of Christ. The Pharisees and the Sadducees did that. That's why somewhere in one of the Gospels, there's what's called the Lament to Jerusalem, where it's just before he let himself be sacrificed. He's standing on the hill looking at Jerusalem, thought, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I lament. I don't remember that quote. because he offered them up a higher level of teaching and they rejected it. It's like, oh well, you had this. It's like earlier, someone gave you the secrets of the universe and they set it on a shelf or threw it away and ignored it. You had a question?
When you were talking about lower love versus this, you threw in the word agape, and I thought that was the higher love.
No, there's like 6 definitions of love in ancient Greece. There's, like carnal love. There's my good buddy friendship love. Agape is just love for everybody.
Mm.
But all of those are versions of, I have that somewhere. I can pull it out.
Yeah,
There's different names. There's for different versions of the concept of love, and agape just means the love for everybody. It doesn't necessarily mean that higher frequency from the higher centrum.
I believe
Higher
that's
emotional
how it's taught in Thelema.
Okay, maybe that's what they're doing. That's not what the original Greek definition was
Let's see
by
if I can bring it
what
up.
I've read. Specifically, what I'm referring to and what Christ referred to is that higher emotional centrum emotion of love that specifically comes from Tiferet on the Tree of Life from our heart chakra. A perfectly balanced, awakened, fully functional heart chakra. And we radiate that out. And that's the love rays we need to zap everybody with to neutralize fear. So if Thelema refers and uses a term for that, okay, good. Go do it.
Oh, here it is.
What?
It is eros, or sexual passion, philia, or deep friendship, ludus, or playful love, agape, or love for everyone, pragma, or long-lasting love, philotia, or love for self.
Okay. Yeah, that's what that's cool you found it that fast.
Yeah.
But
What system is that under?
that's
Greece.
from ancient Greece.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from ancient Greece and all their different versions of love. But when you tap into the higher emotional centrums and that love, that's what we have to use to neutralize fear. And that's why Christ could look at a murderer and love him. That's why you look at the idiot at the office where you work who is just the most annoying jerk you've ever met, and you can zap them with love rays and they'll be a little less jerky, right? That was not just a feel-good instruction to his disciples. That was a hardcore esoteric physics command of how to try and help people. They zap them with the love rays.
Well, he refers to it as law.
Mm-hmm.
So he's thrown out all the Mosaic laws and said they've been fulfilled with him, and the new law is so it's a universal principle then at that point.
So what we're trying to do in this Toltec work is awaken in people a sense that there is a higher purpose for society than just dragging yourself home through rush hour traffic from a job you hate to watch sitcoms and drink beer and argue with your spouse and then do it all again tomorrow. That's not the purpose of human existence. These higher laws, as taught by many cultures over time, and in the Toltec version is we use the word transcendence. Maya, the world of illusion, is alluded to a lot. It's probably the best known description that none of this is real. We're living in a holographic projection. So what we need to do then is learn to control the hologram.
Mm.
And you have all the machinery to do it. It's hard-coded, it's hardware in your brain. We have neurons in our brain that generate coherent light. What's the other name for coherent light?
Lasers.
Ding, ding, ding. 3 ding, ding, ding. In one night.
She's on
You're
a roll.
on it. Let me tell you.
I think you should be getting later.
3 dingy dingies.
Must be the herba mate.
Why would I bring that up when I'm talking about holograms?
Because you need a laser to do a hologram.
Oh,
2 of them, right? You have to have
And
2
then ding,
coming
ding.
from.
Ding ding
Yeah.
ding ding.
I remember the first hologram I saw. It was in, I don't know, I was stuck in some airport in the middle of BFE, and in their like main concourse area, there was this guy standing there talking, you know, and it was like there was nothing around him. You could walk, you could stick your hand through it, but you know, you couldn't tell where it was coming from. It was really amazing.
Yeah. Just like the Star Wars movie, the first one, where
Mhm.
help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. Remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. So our brains store memories not in our brain cells, but in a holographic field generated by our brain. That's where long-term memory is actually stored. Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe, summarizes that data very nicely. When we get a critical mass of people working together, we can change the larger hologram. I need you to be able to hold your attention on one subject for a relatively long period of time. And I need you to be able to channel large amounts of energy. So use the Akadwa for the benefit of well-being, but use it daily, every day. Use it for something. Use it for lots of somethings. And then we will get ourselves ready to be able to do this. This is the work the Toltecs have done from time immemorial. What we now call the Toltecs is basically the North American version of these ancient mystery school traditions which date back far before Atlantis. Because of the great physical trauma and upheavals the world experienced in that Atlantean time frame, we tend not to push back farther than that too much. Although, I mean, we're uncovering things all the time. I just saw a great little article that I found interesting when they're looking at some of the oldest cave writings of about 40,000 years old in caves on every continent except Antarctica, because, you know, it's covered with ice. And, you know, North America, South America, Asia, Africa, Europe, they have caves, and it's these same symbols that we've been studying all over the world. I don't know if you saw that little thing I
I
posted.
sent it to you.
Oh, you sent it to me. I thought it was great, so I reposted it. So, yeah, it's really cool.
I couldn't tell if it was the same ones or not, but it was the fact that they were the same on all 5 continents.
Mhm.
Deep in caves, which shows that they had some universal knowledge that
Right.
when they went into the
Right.
caves for whatever reason, they were recording their stuff with the same symbolic
Yeah,
language.
that's right. It was you. You sent it as a message, not just sharing. Okay. So it was really cool. So humanity goes back much further than academia wants you to believe. And history is far more elegant and far more complicated than they want you to believe. And our history is far more powerful than they want you to believe. They, meaning academia and the people who control that. The people who are right now doing everything they can to prevent anybody else from controlling the hologram. So learn to use the Akadwa. Use it for the benefit of all beings everywhere. Use it and use it and use it and get good at using it. Use it for everything you do and find new ways of using it. So when Sarah reads the physics books I've recommended, Muad'Dib, and learns how to levitate, then she gets to teach everybody how to levitate. Then our whole school will know how to levitate. And then we can amaze our friends with our ability to levitate above earthquakes when the world comes crashing down. Or whatever else we use it for.
Just when I asked him if there was questions, so I have one when you're
Okay,
when you're
let's
wrapped
hear
up.
the question.
So this one is from Sarah. She says, what specifically does he want us to increase focus and power quickly? So I think that she's referring to when you keep telling us to
Use the Akadwa.
just use the Akadwa on everything
Okay,
all the time.
so let me think of how I want to answer that. What I want you to do most is start pushing the envelope. We all had the uses that attracted us to this energy. For me, it was mostly healing. But even there, I had to start pushing the envelope because I figured, oh, well, somebody will show me what to do with this. Well, nobody did. Coyote wasn't teaching that work at that time. So I started playing. I started figuring out different ways of combining the frequencies for certain things. It can be, we can use this the same way we send to an object and leave information there and somebody else can retrieve it. We can bypass the object and send to people. This would be a great set of tests we can do on telepathy using a Akadwa as the carrier wave. You can do it co-located, trying to send across the room. You can send to the other end of the state. You can send to the other side of the world. You just need somebody there that you can work with.
Or meeting in the dream time.
Meeting in the dream time.
Well, even just the idea, okay, we're starting out with these, basic exercises where we're making a loop or, and reversing that. Okay, so then if we're sending then to another person, we can have our hands close and then we can start getting farther and farther and farther apart. So one short-term goal would be to be able to control a space, and whether you're sending to a crystal on the other side of the room that, or you've got them kind of set up in a configuration so that even though you don't have other people there to work with you in a healing circle, that you can, employ, with their permission, crystals and things to set up a circle. And just, when you can, work on the space with the energy and then leave and come back and still be able to sense that your space has been charged with the energy, then you're starting to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And the other thing is checking for what you perceive as leakages. Does your space feel secure?
Yeah.
So,
those are good examples. Kind of going off the healing vortex, that double vortex we like to do. For healing, we typically will be in a room and we will fill the room with the double vortex. When we were down running a healing circle for Chico, this is 2 days after the Paradise Fire started, I just felt in the moment I was called to make it bigger. And it became 25 miles in diameter. In radius. It was huge. And I could see it from the higher planes, what we were doing. And when we started that session, the clouds of smoke that was black. It was black as night in the middle of the day. And yet when we went outside a couple hours later, right center over where we were was completely clear. We had cleared it all out. And there was just like this little pocket of clear with the smoke going around it. So push the envelope and other than follow your intuition, and whatever you're going to do, find a way to use the Ikadu to make it better, to do it with more power, to do it more convincingly, to basically use this tool to enhance what you are, who and what you are. You know, when you can use the Ikadu to consciously send your etheric body, your sensory body, your attention body out into the world to gather more data, just start being creative. I don't want to limit you, and I don't want to tell you must do this or you must not do that. Just use it for the benefit of all beings everywhere. Find new things, like you and Serenity did when you came up with the peacock combination. That's pushing the envelope.
Serenity was saying hi earlier.
Oh, hi, Serenity. Sorry that we had a time delay. We're trying to do a lot tonight.
And Stellan and Serenity are, you know, talking online. So
Oh.
say hi to Stellan
Hi, Stellan.
and Brennan. And
So Stellan and Serenity are communicating again. That's good. I like that.
There has been some talk about telepathy.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think one of the bottom line areas there is just a POG. And, you know, you might want to briefly say something to the Tampa group about POGing, but the idea is that we're sending out a sonar ping to people in our group, and we're not interfering in their space, and we're not trying to get into their head, and we're not trying, you know, so if you're going to do an experiment, you know, and you have somebody on the other end who is going to work with you, a partner, you know, say, okay, you know, when you get some kind of hit about me, write it down, and then you guys can talk later about, yeah, I got a really strong impression of you at this particular time, and then so you use scientific methods to practice and
record your data.
Yeah.
Pay attention to dreams.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So for the benefit of my Tampa gang, actually it's Nina's Tampa gang. I haven't
It's
met you
our
yet.
Tampa gang.
Our Tampa gang.
The Tampa
Pogging
team.
is a term, P-O-G, that stands for Pack of Green. It's a term that comes from gaming, specifically Diablo 2, which is a game that's conducted as a group. People from all over the world could log on and play this game together. And the key to success in Diablo 2 is you stick together. You want to move your pieces around the screen in a pack. And everybody's a little green dot, so it's called the Pack of Green. And when somebody runs off and does something by themselves, it usually jeopardizes the success of the whole mission, and everybody dies.
Leroy.
Yeah, Leroy. Look that one up. Look it up. So we use that term to denote being on the same wavelength, on the same frequency, on the same mission, holding the same intent with the work that we do as a group. One of the secrets to the Toltec work is this group work, and very few other systems even acknowledge it as A, possibility, or B, necessary. The group work, you get benefits from being in each other's energy fields. We start to share each other's knowledge. We impart abilities. This is like resonance. You know, I hang out with Bonnie, and next thing I know, I'm a good artist. Well, an okay artist.
You can draw waveforms on the chart now.
She hangs out with me. She hangs out with me, and all of a sudden, she can lecture on lasers and holograms,
right,
and other aspects of modern physics that other people go, huh?
Bonnie's a ding-dinger tonight.
So the whole concept of a group work is one of the core key secrets of the Toltec. Oh, a secret? Shoot, I just mentioned it out loud on internet TV. We work together. It's the energy fields. It's that same way you make a new magnet by rubbing a piece of iron on an existing magnet. Next thing you know, you've got two magnets. And we work together this way. We polish each other. We refine each other. And there's work that requires a group to accomplish. And that's what I'm hoping to get enough people ready to do. Is some of the higher, more important for humanity work that cannot be done by one person alone. We cannot do it if we try to get hundreds of people involved. Somewhere between 1 and 3 dozen is an optimal number for a Toltec working group. And there needs to be a certain level of proficiency with the energy, with attention, and the ability to pog. So you get somebody showing up at the last minute who's never heard of pogging, and sometimes bad things will happen if you try to send them on a mission or they don't know how to pog. So we have to work together over time to develop our confidence in our ability and experience in our ability to work together. So we need people who are willing to work and willing to show up and willing to work with energy and willing to work for humanity. So, any other questions? Yes.
I have a question. So I'm going to take you back to after Bonnie got the ding ding the last time. The last ding ding, you never quite finished that thought, and that was
What was that thought?
That was in the transcendence of the Maya in the illusional aspect of reality.
Yeah,
to control
holograms.
the hologram.
Okay,
Went
so
off on lasers, and then it just kind of.
this is one of the pieces of group work that I'm referring to. Is if we get a group of proficient people, we can combine our waveforms in a way that gives us the power and the ability to change the hologram. We can change the collective consciousness. We change the paradigms. It's part of that new model, okay? And we have to find clever, creative ways of changing the hologram that is for the benefit of all beings everywhere. And if somebody's attacking you, you have every right to defend yourself. So if we change the hologram in a way to defend people who are otherwise defenseless, and we have to take out evil forces in the process, that's one of those, oh well, they had their chance. I have no problem doing that. Just make sure that what we're doing is truly for the benefit of all beings everywhere, and you're willing to live karmically with the results. So the same way as somebody broke in here and decided they were going to attack my wife, I don't recommend that, by the way. I have no problem taking them out in any way.
Head on a stake.
Heads on pikes. My ancestors invented that sport, by the way. So we changed the hologram. We're not deliberately trying to harm people, but we are going to defend and promote the transcendence of humanity. Transcending is referring to an awareness and understanding that this physical world is an illusion, and we can transcend it into something better. That's what we're referring to. That, according to the Tolteca-Yoto philosophy, that's been around more than 8,000 years on this continent, that philosophy says that the whole purpose of humanity and human culture is spiritual transcendence, and everything else is to support that. So that's kind of where we're going, Dean. What's your next question?
My question then is for those who are new, like maybe level ones, maybe just very new to the Akadua and to this Toltec way, or to quantum physics or physics in general, holographic or not, how would you suggest that they learn about the hologram aspect of things if they're, it's one thing for those of us who understand how the holograms work and what that means, but those who are like, holograms, what? How would you suggest that they open up to that so that there can be an opportunity to work with the collective consciousness on a higher level?
There's two things. One, I'm going to start with how to work with the collective consciousness on a higher level. Is we're doing a series of meditations at either 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. Pacific time. So if you live in Florida, that's 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. your time. See, I can still add and subtract 3. I used to be really good at it when I lived in Florida and my parents were on the West Coast. And I had to keep that number 3 in my mind.
Oh, so you don't wake people up.
Right, exactly. We're doing a set of meditations. And what we're doing is envision, get into the best meditative posture and position you know, activate your Akadua, and send it. There's that basic energy ball exercise we do, but instead of an energy ball between your hands, envision the world between your hands. It naturally will have, when you're looking at this with your higher vision, a pink glow around it that represents the combined consciousness field of the planet and everyone on it. So that in a way you can think of it that it is the collective consciousness field for this elegant, complex organism that is the Earth and its humans. As you're sending the energy there, we do 2 things. One, we're sending brilliant white light with the intent of changing that pink field to a glowing white field. And right now the mantra we're using is,
We are all one.
we are all one.
Love is the answer.
Love is the answer.
Peace now.
Peace now. I keep getting confused. I have to mentally start with the one we were doing before
And then shift it.
and then shift it. So I was, we are all one. Love is the answer. Peace now. And that's what we're implanting in the human collective consciousness field. And if you can do it twice a day, great. If you can only do one of those times, great. If you can't do every day, do it whenever you can. My schedule is such that I mostly only do it in the mornings. If I'm not busy at 7, like tonight I was busy at 7, every night this week I'll be busy at 7 until maybe Friday, because I have other things I do in the evening. So for me, it's 7 a.m. We wanted to go twice a day because everybody has a different schedule. Do whichever ones of those you're able to. One of our students, Maria, has this website that it's a graphical representation of some of the random number generator things. And so when human consciousness alters what would otherwise have been happening, and it's explained on the website, there's this dot that changes color, and based on their analysis. And she's been able to track that many, many times as we do this at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. We change the dot color. It's like a 5-minute delay. And so it's working. In some of my other meditations, I've had feedback from the higher planes that, yeah, this is a good thing, keep it up. So if you want to help with that, that's the first practical exercise I would recommend that you participate in. And if you really just want to understand what the heck is a hologram, read Michael Talbot's book. It's written in plain language. It's called The Holographic Universe. You could probably whip through it in a weekend. It's not that long. It's not that complex. It's not hard to understand. and it's extremely powerful. It talks about how our brain, the goal of the book is to present the evidence that long-term memory is not stored in our physical brain, but stored in this holographic field. So he has to introduce, well, what's a hologram? What's holographic? What is this? How does all this work? And then he goes through some of the medical evidence to show that over a period of time, there's been examples of people who've had each piece of their brain removed, not all from one person, but one person had the left frontal lobe removed, due to accident or trauma or cancer or something, and somebody else had this part removed, and somebody else had that part removed, and over time, it didn't matter what part of the brain was removed, none of it affected long-term memory. And his conclusion, which I believe is correct, is long-term memory is not stored in the brain. It's stored in the holographic field. And if you access the holographic field, you only have to access one teeny little piece and you get everything. That's how holograms work. And that's all explained. It's a fascinating book. And that's the best one I know to explain all that, and kind of from a standpoint of how do we human organisms work and what can we do with that information. So start there and participate in those meditations and read the book and see where it takes you. See where it takes you. Any other questions?
Maria had asked for you to talk about elementals, and I asked her in what context, and if this was a new subject, it might be better to ask this one at the beginning of a discourse. She said it was a new subject.
Okay.
So, is there any instruction you might want to give her to clarify her question more?
No. If she's starting it as a new subject, what I would say is elementals are a category of sentient beings. They are spiritual beings, meaning they don't necessarily always exist in the physical world, but they are existing primarily at different frequencies. If you are patient, you can learn to communicate with them. You can learn to employ their aid. You can learn to see them. There's a lot of folklore, especially European folklore, about elementals. In Asia, they have other folklore about elementals. They exist everywhere. The Native Americans talk about the elemental beings and communication with them. We live in a very rural area here at the base of Mount Shasta. We have elementals on our property. The best time to see them is at those transition times. In Celtic traditions, we call it the time between the times. So sunrise, where the sun's not fully up, it's not day, but it's no longer night. And at sundown, when it's sun's over the horizon, it's kind of duskish. So dusk and dawn time frames are the best times to see them, but you won't see them by looking directly at them. You need to use what we call in the Akadwa manual the dreamer's stare, and diffuse your vision and see the whole field of vision at once, and sit quietly and just sense. Just sense. Elementals often have a mentality that's very playful and a bit mischievous, and they can be like a troublesome child, and they will monkey with your stuff just because it's fun to do. And so learning to communicate with them, learning to work with them, so that stops happening, you can give them a better job to do. we have here on our property a labyrinth that's been morphed into combining it with a Native American medicine wheel. And there's a long story behind it. I was working out there in the middle of the summer last year, early summer, and I started getting stung by hornets. And then I realized, wow, right here, there's a big opening for an underground hornet's nest going back and forth. And we had here in Northern California a heavy drought, very hot, dry. You couldn't do the usual thing of just pour gas down it and light it off to get rid of them because there was too much fire hazard. And we were literally surrounded by forest fires last summer. So I wasn't about to risk that. So we kind of had to put work on the medicine wheel on hold and wait. And so I actually went out. We have a little bench overlooking the labyrinth, and I did a meditation, and I enlisted the help of the elementals. And I said, this thing's got to go. This is sacred land. We can't have these hornets here. And then I walked away and forgot about it. We didn't use it. And then all the students came over about a month later, and we went out there just to kind of inspect it. And there was a huge hole where the hornet's nest used to be.
Tunnel.
And it had been all dug out, and bits and pieces of hornet's nest ripped up and torn all over, and the hornets were all gone. And there was these little teeny tiny footprints. So I knew it wasn't a bear. It was too small for that. And then I did a little research to find out, well, what other animal likes to eat underground hornet's nest? And it's a skunk. So I had enlisted and requested the aid of the elementals, and within a month, a skunk had gone in and ripped up and eaten all the hornets, and probably the larvae and all. I just probably had a great old time gorging themselves. And that's a way I've worked with elementals. I don't know which ones exactly, but I called in elementals. I said, I need help. I need these hornets to go away. And one or two skunks had a great feast one night and just ripped them all up.
That was a big hole.
It was a pretty big hole, yeah. Yeah, we have a witness right over here. And they were all there when I found it. Like, surprise, I was telling them, be careful of the hornets. And what hornets? They're gone. So elementals will work.
So I have one last question here from Will. He says, if long-term memory is holographic, how can we use the Akadua to increase it?
To increase what?
Long-term memory, I'm assuming.
Can you clarify your question at all, Will?
And then while he's getting that and getting back to you, Sarah just asked another question, which is, my guides are pushing me to learn how to light fire using the Akadua. Does he have anything on that?
It should be possible. I know that when I have a fire going, I can manipulate it with the Akadua very easily. I know when I'm trying to start a fire, I haven't done it without a match or a lighter, but I know that what I do is I start by concentrating the energy. I'm sending energy into my little pile of tinder and kindling, and I go from nothing going in the stove to a full roaring fire in just a couple of minutes. And I've watched other people just struggle. I'll tell you those stories another time. When we used to be a host farm for an organic intern program, and it's one of those facepalm things, watching people try to learn to start fires. So let me know how that works, and when you got the technique, teach it to the school, Sarah. I can't do all this work. You guys have to start doing it. You're level 4 now.
I wasn't sure quite how you had asked your question to Will, but oh, here we go. He said yes. Is there a way to focus the energy to remember stuff better?
Like where you put your keys.
I'm going to answer this two ways. One is if there's something from the distant past, things that occurred when you, long before you received the Akadwa, for example. Use the meditation posture you've been taught, activate your Akadwa, and maybe go through the inner teacher meditation. And if you don't know the inner teacher meditation yet, don't worry about it. But Will does. And ask the question to your angel. And then the other way, of course, is to do one of the timeline exercises and go back to the time in question and watch it. So that's for old stuff. Now, if it's ongoing now, you want to remember things, you're trying to learn something, you've got to take a test next month, or you just want to remember everything, is you want to enhance your state of consciousness. And you do that with your intent. So you activate the Akadwa and you're doing everything with your intent. So you activate the Akadwa and you tell yourself, I will remember this. And whatever it is, whether it's raw data or it's a task you have to do, build some kind of a thought form structure around it. And then mentally put it on some kind of a shelf you create in your inner temple, like bookshelves, and say, oh, I'm going to put this there. And so you've got a connection to that. And use the Akadwa. Then you want to remember things. You've got that link then. And there's probably fine details we can play with and fine tune that. But the basic thing is you hold an intent to remember something. You amplify that intent and your understanding of what it is you want to remember with the Akadwa, and then you create a link to where that information is.
It sounds like a lot of what you're talking about right now sounds like what we might call mapping in the dreaming.
Right.
And even the conscious intent of saying I'm going to remember this is putting a little marker on that map.
Right.
That you can retrace your steps to.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when you mentioned remembering your keys. Well, if you created a place and you've consciously put your keys there, you're going to have a better chance of consciously remembering where you put them.
That little key, I will remember this.
Mm-hmm.
We used that in some of the exercises in the level 4 class. Use that material in your day-to-day life. I didn't teach you those things so you could just put them on the back burner and forget them. These are literally some of the keys to the secrets of the universe. So use them, please.
Okay.
Remember, use the Akadwa for the benefit of all beings. Any other questions coming in? Okay. Well, we went over our allotted time, and that's a good thing because we got a lot covered. I want to thank you all for tuning in, whether it was live, real time, or whether you're one of our regulars who watches on tape delay. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. I'm going to put out the energy that there won't be a blizzard to turn off our power, so that we will be back next week, and bring your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aho.
Oh.